Hello, welcome to Gardener's World. Well, I've left Longmeadow today and come here to RHS Rosemoor in Devon. It's a big garden, over 60 acres, and it's packed with beautiful things to see and ideas that one can take inspiration from and apply to our gardens at home. The orchard and the vegetable garden are really looking fantastic, and the hot garden here, despite an autumnal chill in the air this morning, is still blazing with colour. This week, Carol revels in late-season colour from the sedum collection here at Rosemoor.
Stonecrop, our native sedum, is very small, but it comes from a big family. And lots of its bigger brothers and sisters are at their very best at this time of year.
Jo visits an old garden that's been given a new twist by the garden designer Pete Aldorf.
This is the entrance, and all is revealed. Here there's waves and waves of Molinia grasses looking amazing when backlit by the sun.
And we see what it's really like to be an RHS volunteer with a visit to Harlow Carr near Harrogate.
I got into volunteering because it was that stage in my life where I had to give up the house, the garden and the allotment, and there was that big gap that I was going to miss.
When I last visited Rosemoor a couple of years ago, it was 2 weeks earlier in the season, and there was a real difference. The colours were much more vibrant. But this hot garden is still looking really good as we slide into autumn. But nothing is looking better, to my mind, than the miscanthus flowers. Now, we tend to grow grasses for the way that they move and their texture and as a foil to things around them. But these just show that they have flowers that hold their own with anything else around them. I should be looking at the fruit here at Rosemoor and particularly seeing how they grow big quantities in small spaces. I'm also going to see what it takes to earn an award of garden merit in vegetables. Now, a couple of weeks ago, Carol came here to Rosemoor to look at one of the star plants in the borders, which also grows in some unlikely places.
Growing along all the cracks and crevices of this dry stone wall is a little creeping plant. It's sedum acre, stonecrop. It's a prime example of how plants evolved to cope with the most inhospitable of situations. It does it in 3 ways, really. First of all, each of these tiny leaves is fat, it's plump, because it contains water. The leaves act as reservoirs. Secondly, they're coated in this sort of waxy surface, so it doesn't lose any moisture through transpiration. It retains whatever it's got. And thirdly, every single bit that comes anywhere near a bit of soil or falls between the rocks will take root. Sedums take their name from the Latin sedere, to sit, and that's precisely what it does. It just nestles down, makes itself at home in every nook and cranny. Well, stonecrop, our native sedum, is very small, but it comes from a big family. And lots of its bigger brothers and sisters are at their very best at this time of year. Over the past 25 years that David Squire has been working at Rosemoor, he's got to know the sedums intimately.
In a garden this size, it's great to have plants that are so versatile and able to fit into so many different areas.
Yeah.
That makes it easy, but they're also very, very good florally and, if you like, foliage-wise as well, so they're really good.
They do have splendid leaves, don't they? Lots and lots of them.
That's right.
Is this autumn joy?
Well, it used to be called that, but it's now referred back to Herbst Freuder. It's probably the tallest we grow. It's
Yeah.
really quite strong,
Yeah.
very effective. So it'll fit into quite a large-scale border and it won't look out of place.
Over many years, you must have grown lots of sedums here at Rosemoor. But how do you stop them flopping?
What we usually do is put a few sticks around Herbstfreude or a few stakes while it's growing through. But you can also do the Chelsea chop and shorten the shoots around the showtime, Chelsea showtime, back to about 6 inches or even lower. Look a bit funny to start with, but the plant will bush out.
But aren't there any varieties that don't flop, that just tend to stand up for themselves?
Yeah, thankfully. Of course, that saves work for the gardener.
This is a great one, isn't it?
Yeah, Sedum Matrona's a new one we got in a couple of years ago.
And what's so special about it, do you think?
I think
Apart from the fact that it stands up for itself.
Yeah, that saves a lot of work. Yeah, I think it's just the contrast between the flowers, which are a sort of soft pink, the good, strong, darker stems, and the fleshy leaves, which are somewhere in between. I think you can just look at it for ages and it really impresses you.
It's a bit of a shady corner, isn't it, to grow a sedum?
Yeah, most sedums actually like full sun. But this particular corner, Sedum Joyce Henderson's growing in, it's a little bit shady, and you can see how the shoots have actually grown strangely towards the sunshine.
It's done a little bit of outstretched arms, hasn't it?
As with most perennials, they're always best divided every 3 or 4 years. That helps to stop that sort of thing happening.
And is there anything else you do? I mean, any other sort of pruning, cutting back?
Well, occasionally, if you've got what we call an unstable cultivar, then you sometimes have to take the reverted shoots back. In other words, we've got this sedum spectabile cultivar called Stardust, which is supposed to be white, but reverts back to the parent, the sedum spectabile pink. And one year I was down amongst it, cutting the pink out because we'd got a white border I was trying to keep true to.
Yeah.
And a little girl came along and said, "Why are you taking the pink out?" And I thought, and she sounded so sorry for it that I stood back, looked at it, and I thought, I think we'll leave it. So what we do now is we leave it in the border with its pink and white like a carpet.
It's a lovely story, and I think she was right.
Yeah, I think so, really.
Of course, another great quality about sedums is that butterflies and bees love them. They're like a magnet for them, particularly later on in the summer. Now, I've come here to the main vegetable garden at Rosemoor, which is still really productive. But I want to particularly see how they're growing their fruit, because they are growing really big crops in quite small spaces. John, hello.
Hello there. Nice to see you.
Now, you have a lot of espaliers and cordons and various types of trained fruit, and they do seem to be very productive.
They are, yes. I mean, if you look at a typical bush tree in your typical orchard, I mean, these produce just as much of a crop, really. But obviously, if you're limited for space, it's a great way of growing apples.
You've got your espaliers here, which are open, but can you grow them just as well against a fence or a trellis or a wall?
You can, yeah. A wall fence trellis makes no odds. Southerly or westerly aspects probably better. Obviously, the fruit gets the heat to ripen, and you get the protection when it's in blossom as well. But it's really down to you what you've got in your own garden where you can place it.
Can you buy them fully formed, or do you have to train them yourself?
It depends on if you want instant effect, you can buy them pre-trained. Obviously, the cost is higher.
What sort of price were we thinking about?
Depends on size, maybe around the £50 mark, something like that. But you can obviously train them yourself, which is maybe more satisfying, but obviously takes the time to get them going. If you talk about the tiers, getting a tier level, say roughly a year a tier to go up the plant.
Now, if you do want to grow an espalier, you'll need more than one variety.
Well, it's all about pollination, isn't it, with apples? So if you haven't got the space, has your neighbour got some apples? Are they the right pollination type? Some of the crab apples, ornamental crab apples, are good as well. So it depends what's in your location, really.
We've got different sizes of trained fruit here. I mean, just in front of us is a step over, and we've got the espalier, and behind that are the orchard trees. Let's simplify this down. What is a rootstock?
Well, obviously, all your fruit trees, they're grafted onto a different rootstock, a root system, if you like. And this basically controls the growth of the tree This one's on MM106, which is a fairly vigorous rootstock. And that does well for our climate, our sort of heavy loam soil.
And the top section, which bears the fruit,
Yep.
that defines the apple.
That defines the apple, but
Yeah.
it's basically the growth rate or the eventual size of the plant,
Right.
which is controlled by your rootstock.
And if you don't know what rootstock to get, how do you go about selecting it?
The best thing's really ask a local specialist nursery. They'll know your area, what grows best in your soil, which varieties do best on certain rootstocks, so they'll be the best to help you.
In September, in the rain, the sun went out just like a
Now, of course, if you've got real limited space or even no garden at all, you can grow apples in pots.
Well, yeah, there's nothing wrong with it at all. It's, again, choosing a good rootstock.
Now, do you need a really dwarf rootstock if they're in a pot?
That's what you'd think. What we found is we use a fairly vigorous one, so we use M26. Just because as the plant fills the pot, the dwarfer rootstocks actually sort of go backwards, so you don't get that vigour. So by using more vigorous rootstock, the tree sort of has more longevity, a longer life.
So the tree is actually trying very hard to be a big tree in a small space.
It is, yeah.
What do you feed them with?
We just use a liquid feed. It's a high potash feed. So maybe during the growing season every couple of weeks, or something like a normal tomato feed, really.
But you could have apples absolutely ripe on a roof garden in a pot.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, the beauty is if you haven't got a garden to plant an apple, there's nothing to say you can't grow them.
Everyone should do it.
Exactly, yeah.
September, in the rain.
When you're choosing what apple to grow, the best place to start is to choose the apple you most like to eat. And the best way to do that is to go along and try different ones. Now, as well as the 4 major RHS gardens, they have over 100 partner gardens. And this means that RHS members can go along free on certain days, and anybody can go along and get inspiration. And it really means that you haven't got far to travel. There's bound to be one near where you live. And Joe has been to North Yorkshire, to Scampston Hall, which is one of these partner gardens.
The English country house has long provided a playground for ambitious garden designers, enthusiastic benefactors and rolling acres, creating the perfect setting for them to show off their skills and exercise their art. Scampston Hall in Yorkshire is no exception. Some of the greatest names in garden history have left their mark here. Visionaries like Charles Bridgman and Capability Brown. And there are still many of the classic elements you'd expect to see in the grounds of a stately home. But this garden isn't stuck in the past. Just inside these walls is something very different. You're immediately taken on a journey. You have no choice but to follow this straight path. It's very clever because at first it all feels so familiar. You've got the formality of this lovely long hedge running the whole length of the garden, the wall on the other side is the backdrop for the plants, and the plants are sort of in keeping with the space. But then you start to see things that you don't expect, like a fantastic combination of Circis forest pansy with a white hydrangea and then a Deschampsia, a grass setting it off too. Really beautiful. But you know something's up. You know there's some contemporary elements in this garden, but you can't see into the main body of the garden. You can't get in there, you can't see it, you're blocked out completely. So your sense of expectation just builds and builds. And that's what it's all about. And the path has brought me 3/4 of the way around the walled garden, and all is revealed. Here there's waves and waves of Molinia grasses looking amazing when backlit by the sun. And it's this style of planting that's made this garden's designer world famous. It's the work of Dutch master Piet Oudolf, who's renowned for his naturalistic perennial planting style. And here he's combined it with a real sense of formality, plenty of hedges and evergreen structure. And in effect, what he's done is reinvent what goes into a wall garden, bringing it bang up to date with some fantastic contemporary planting. It was one of his first British commissions, and this radical choice by the owners, Sir Charles and Lady Ledyard, put Scampston at the centre of one of those game-changing moments in British garden history. What made you choose Piet Oudolf? It was really quite pioneering of you.
The first time he came and laid the plan on the kitchen table, Charles turned to me and said, "Does this man know what he's talking about?" And I said, "I am so excited about this plan. I am really, really excited about this plan." I just think you have to be innovative and creative, and you have to push the boundaries.
So there's incredible horticultural history here. Did you feel a responsibility when you're putting this garden in?
You can't just sort of still exist in the 18th century. I mean, we've had some wonderful gardeners here, and I'm pretty passionate about plants, so it was nice and important to carry it on, but in a contemporary way.
This is a refreshed, walled garden for the modern day.
Yeah.
People want to see it, they want to come here,
Yeah.
they can see good horticulture being carried out here.
Yeah, people love it, and they love the whole thing of having an old house full of old things, surrounded by a capability brown park, which is all part and parcel of the English landscape, and then they pop into the wall garden, and it's contemporary.
This garden has not only brought a radical new look to Scampston, but it's also had a major impact on the way the garden is maintained. Today it's managed by just one gardener, Paul Smith, whereas in the past it would have required a much larger team.
When you look at the whole Oudolf planting style, you don't get really big peaks and troughs in the need for labour. So in a traditional herbaceous border, for example, you'd have a really big peak towards the end of May, where you'd have all the staking, the irrigation, the feeding. With this style of planting, there is no staking, it all holds itself up, there's no feeding, there's no irrigation, so therefore the maintenance is very level right across the year.
So the plants just battle it out for themselves pretty much.
For a plant, you have to be tough to survive here. You know, if you can't survive in the environment, then you don't get the place, and you would eventually be grown out by the stronger plants.
In February, you just chop this lot down, do you?
We would cut it all right off. A bit like a wildflower meadow, the essence is not to put food back into the ground. We don't want soft planting because there's no staking. The soft plants would then fall over. So the whole essence is to actually take all the material away. Certain plants will do different jobs within the garden. So if you take monarda, for instance, the seed head on the monarda will stay there, but it'll back up so the panicum grass that's coming up by it. And then it all becomes shape and form as much as colour as well. So that in itself's quite interesting. So yeah, it's a real plantsman's garden.
With really good design and great plant choice, you can create a low-maintenance garden that looks absolutely fantastic.
Now, I'm clutching this packet of seeds, which has, like many seeds do, a logo. The logo has a cup on it and refers to an AGM. Now, that's not Annual General Meeting, but stands for Award of Garden Merit, which the RHS awards to plants and seeds after doing extensive trials. And they run some of these trials here at Rosemoor. So I've come along to find out what the plants have to do to get this award. Peter, hello.
Hello, Monty.
Now, you're trialling runner beans. How many different varieties?
We've got 28 varieties this year. There's ones that are traditional varieties that are growing, as well as some new introductions.
But presumably none of them have got an AGM.
Some of them already do have AGMs. We're trialling to make sure they're still worthy of holding on to that AGM.
Right, OK. What are you looking for?
So we're looking for things like yield, so we want to make sure that you're going to get a good crop off them. It's tested for taste, Also looking to make sure they're not a variety you can get a stringy bean from, because nobody really wants a stringy runner bean, as well as making sure that you're not going to end up with a load of pest and disease.
Growing is obviously part of the process.
Yes.
But I see you've been picking.
Yes.
Tell me what criteria you're using. Just because, you know, we've got 2 different beans here.
Yes.
Different sizes. How do you know that they're both ready for picking?
You can tell by looking at them, they're getting to that point where they're not going to do any more. So you can just start to see the skin is just starting to get a bit more wrinkled, a bit more sort of aged. And that's sort of showing that it's good for picking.
Then what happens?
We take them off and we go and weigh each variety, so we get an idea of the yield for that day, and we also take a measurement of an average bean 3 times a week.
So you pick, measure, weigh all of them 3 times a week?
3 times a week, yes.
Right, with 28 different varieties.
With 28 different varieties, yes.
That's in itself, that's quite a performance.
It is. It takes 2 of us 2 hours a day to work our way through.
OK, what variety is this?
So this is an Armour that we've got here.
OK, let's go and see how a Norma is doing today.
Okay.
OK, so now what happens?
So now we weigh and measure them. So I take what we've just picked and pop them up onto the scales here. And so now I take a measurement. So here we've got 700 grams of runner beans there. So I record them down. So I look down through my list here, and here we've got an Armour. So I write in on 700.
So we've got the weight.
So we've got the weight. Now we're looking for that average-looking bean that gives you a good representative sample of the lot. So we have a good look through, and we take a measurement. So here,
he's just under a foot.
Yes, he's coming in at 29 centimetres there.
Okay.
So then we take the measurement and write him down.
Is this available for public scrutiny?
Yes, it will be released probably next year onto the RHS website, and it will give you a full list of AGM awards to all plants.
So far, and I accept there's time to go, which is the front runner?
Well, just looking down through the list here, it looks like Firestorm's the one that's performing best.
Never heard of it.
I think it's a fairly new one that's recently been released.
Well, you may not be growing or collecting runner beans, but here are some jobs you can be getting on this weekend from Rosemoor. It's time to lift main crop potatoes. If the tops haven't died down yet, cut them off and leave them for a fortnight to allow the skins to harden. Then, gently dig up the tubers, taking care not to damage them in the process. Either leave them on the surface of the soil for a couple of hours or take them indoors to dry in the dark. Store them somewhere cool and dry in a paper or Hessian sack. Before the autumn gales arrive, it's worth giving tree ties a quick check-over. As a tree grows and its young stem expands, there's a real danger of it becoming constricted, so loosen the tree tie as necessary. Tree ties with buffers will help prevent the stem from rubbing directly against the stake. As you begin to clear your veg patch, consider sowing a green manure. As well as helping to boost fertility for next year's crop and improving soil structure, they're very good at suppressing weeds. Simply broadcast the seed over the surface of the soil, or divide the area up into metre squares and sprinkle the required amount over each section. Rake in and water if no rain is forecast. Of course, a garden of this size, and it's over 60 acres, needs a large staff. But it also depends upon volunteers that come and work here, and there are over 50 working regularly here in the garden. Now, all the RHS gardens use volunteers, and we went to Harlow Carr in Yorkshire to meet one of them.
I got into volunteering because it was that stage in my life where I had to give up the house, the garden and the allotment, and there was that big gap that I was going to miss. One Friday night, watching Gardener's World from Rosemoor, and there was a volunteer speaking. I didn't know such a species existed until then, and I thought, what a good opportunity. So contacted Harlow Carr I don't think I was interviewed. I think they just thought she's done a lot. Maybe we'll try her. Just going to cut off the dead heads of a sunflower and then put them down for the birds to feed from. If you cut the dead heads off, then the plant starts producing more flower heads for more seed, and then these stalks that aren't producing anything, they can be cut down just to make it look tidy. Well, I've been gardening, growing my own vegetables for about 40 years. I don't have any academic qualifications for gardening. I haven't taken any of the RHS exams, but just having lots of experience, being interested, lots of trial and error, really.
It would be fantastic if you can cut all the seed heads from the Primula veris, and we're going to collect all the seed for the woodland team to plant up along the streamside area at the bottom of our garden.
Right. And what about these marky-looking leaves? Do you want these pulling out?
Anything that's looking a little bit diseased or dying, you can pull out from the base.
Yes, right. Until the visitors arrive, it's very quiet, and I'm on my own apart from the staff, so that it was rather like on my allotment, where I was working on my own anyway. And if there's any problem, then I can call out and go and ask for any help. It's a good way of meeting people. There's company, there's enjoyment, and you hear other people's side of things as well. People grow different things, and then you can exchange sort of reminiscence and anecdotes, and that's good fun. Are you student of the year or something, posh?
Yeah.
See, I offered to adopt him, and he wasn't having any. No, you. In the kitchen garden, we get a lot of visitors with questions. I can now identify a problem approaching. Normally, the visitors come along and they potter and they look and they chat. But if you see someone with a determined walk, and even worse, with a little plastic bag, that's a question coming. And it's usually either something slimy or crumbly or creepy crawly. But when I see that, if there's no staff around, I hide behind the runner beans. It's my strategy.
I do agree with Mavis that one of the biggest pleasures in a garden, over and above horticulture and working yourself, is sharing stories with other people. And that just brings it all to life. Well, that's it from Rosemoor. I've had a really good day here, but I'll be back in my own garden at Longmeadow next week, and I'll see you then. Bye-bye. Hello, welcome to Gardener's World. As we come into October, I always really look forward to my favourite harvest of all, which are quinces. And I'm just testing to see if they're ripe, because they do tend to drop into the water. But just by putting my finger on it and levering up, you then get this lovely, downy fruit. And quinces are the most fragrant of all fruits and add depth and subtlety to any apple dish. You can roast it with meat. They really, really are delicious.
This week, Carol goes to North Wales in search of a statuesque wildflower, the Eupatorium.
When you examine these flat heads, you find that they're composed of lots of separate florets, and every single one of them is rich in nectar.
And we visit a grower in County Down in Northern Ireland, whose passion for daffodils has taken over his life.
Now, as well as celebrating and harvesting quinces, October certainly is time to get daffodils into the ground, and as quickly as possible. And I shall be planting some lovely white ones into my writing garden. I'm also thinking, quite early on, I admit, about Christmas. I shall be planting up some bulbs that will flower at home at Christmas, and also some that I intend to give as Christmas presents. Come on, Rach. Come on. Here at Longmeadow, 15 years ago, I planted this orchard. And the trees were tiny, but they were on very vigorous rootstocks because I wanted them to grow into what's called standards. That's trees with a bare trunk. It does mean, though, that collecting the fruit is quite a caper. I can't just reach out and pluck it. Sometimes I have to climb up a long way. I like to store as many apples as possible, and when you store an apple, it must be perfect and unblemished. This apple harvest isn't an event, it's a process. Because when you've got a big tree like this, they ripen over a period of about a month. The ones that get the most sun come first, and then the last ones will follow 4 or 5 weeks later. So I'll pick half a dozen times. And then different trees ripen at different times because they're in different groups. So the very early ones will start ripening in early September, and the last in this orchard is November. So it's quite a long, slow harvest. Right. The next part of the process, having picked them, is to go and store them so they'll last well. What are you doing? Having gone to a lot of trouble to pick them carefully, now you must think how to store them. Now, for years, we've used this. Actually, it's an old bread rack that a bakery used to use that I think we bought for about a tenner 15 years ago and have used it for storage ever since, and it does the job really well. What you need is something that is slatted so you can get air around them. And also, the whole point of storing an apple is to keep the moisture, to slow down the drying out rate. So somewhere cool, but not frosty, dark, and reasonably moist. A shed, a cellar, anything like that will be perfect. As you store each one, just check that it's not blemished and put it on a slat like that. And I'm handling them really carefully. It's worth taking trouble because these will store right through till next spring, and actually they'll probably be better around Christmas time than they are now. And the critical thing is they must not touch. There must be a gap between them. Now you can see I've got one here. That's got insect damage on it. I couldn't see it when I picked it, so I won't store that. But I'm going to put that on the ground and that will go in and get eaten straight away. And the beauty of this is if you've got enough room, it's really easy to store enough apples to eat them every day, right through till at least the following March. And they always, always taste better than apples that you buy. This is a treat, and you can have a treat every day. Now, it's not only the season of apples, it's certainly time to be planting daffodils. But it can be difficult to know which ones to choose because there are an awful lot of different types and varieties. And we went to Northern Ireland to meet a man who grows a huge range and is passionate about every one of them.
I'm a very lucky chap in that I'm doing something I love, and I absolutely adore daffodils and I love breeding them. I became involved with daffodils after sitting beside a chap called Frank Harrison at dinner. He said that he bred daffodils. I said I love daffodils, but I was particularly keen on narcissus, and he looked at me and said they're both the same thing. Anyway, after that he said, come and have a look at my daffodils, which I did, and I was hooked. I was amazed by the variety, the amount of colour, the different forms and everything, and from then I never looked back. We've been breeding for, I think, 16 years now. Frank Harrison always said that I should never lose track of the fact that a daffodil is a garden plant. It's not something that has to be nurtured and in a hothouse softly. It has to be a tough flower. He would pick a flower and then he'd just wave it like this. And if the head came off, he said that was absolutely no use as a garden plant because it's got to be able to stand up in the wind and rain. And this is a nice one known as Connolly, one of his breeding, so I'm very glad the head stayed on. Daffodils, for ease of classification, are listed into divisions. Now, there are 13 divisions, but there are only really 9 that are of import to the average gardener. Division 1 are the large trumpet daffodils, and that's where the trumpet is as long as the petal. Division 2 are the large cup daffodils, so the cup is over 1/3 of the length of the petal. Division 3 are the small cup, where the cup is less than 1/3 of the length of the petal. Division 4 are the doubles. There's a double like a rose almost. The Division 5 is the hybrid of the triandrous species, and it usually hangs its head, bell-like flowers, and often 2 to 3 to the stem. Division 6 is the cyclaminous hybrids. It should have a nice long trumpet, but should also have the petals swept well back. Division 7 are the hybrids of the jonquilla. They have a very sweet and nice scent. Smallish flowers, 2 to 3 to the head. Division 8 are the Tazettas that most people know as paperwhite. They're the ones the Scilly Isles are well known for. Division 9 are the Poeticus. Everybody knows the pheasant's eye, Poeticus recurvus. People have preconceived ideas about daffodils. They all think of Wordsworth and waves of yellow daffodils. But there are very nice white daffodils. There are very nice pink daffodils. I always say to people, if they look at something and say, ooh, that's not a daffodil, I say, well, look at it. It's a lovely flower, isn't it? This particular flower is a seedling. It hasn't got a name and is yellow and pink. This one in particular, although it's small, for the last few years has been winning at the RHS shows. It's very flat, smooth, the petals don't tear, and if you look at almost every one, is the same. They're virtually perfect. This is the double. It's a variety known as Crackington. The interesting thing about this, and it's a challenge to the breeders, doubles have the problem in that they're like a sponge and they soak up the water. So if you haven't got a strong stem, they just collapse. This particular variety doesn't. This actually stands up to it. I'm now trying to shrink the plant so you get these lovely daffodils which can fit into pots or into small gardens. I'm also very keen to develop a replacement to tete-a-tete. I think people are beginning to get a bit bored of tete-a-tete, which appears every Christmas. And if I could produce a nice variety which is different to tete-a-tete and have plant breeders' rights on it, I could retire and drive my Rolls-Royce around the place.
Do you know, even if Neil made a vast fortune from his new type of daffodil, my guess is he wouldn't stop work, because he clearly loves them. And what's surprising about that? We all love daffodils. And there is bound to be one out of that huge variety that works almost in every situation and every kind of garden. And here in the writing garden, I obviously want to add white flowers. No daffodils planted as yet, so I've chosen a variety called Thalia, which is from group 5, the Triandrous group. So it's got an elegant stem, multiple heads, and then fairly small, but really charming white flowers. Now, it doesn't matter what type of daffodil you're going to plant, the technique is much the same. These are going in a border, so the soil is essentially soft. If I was planting into turf, you need to take out a plug, and it's really worth, if you're planting anything more than a handful, buying a bulb planter. And that will take out a plug of soil, you pop the bulb in, and then you put the plug that you've taken out back on top of it, like putting a dowel in a hole. That doesn't really work in a border because the soil is too soft. You can use a long trowel. You can buy bulb planting trowels, and they work fine. That's perfectly good. But actually, what I tend to use in the border is this lovely thing. Now, I don't think you'll be able to buy one. I've certainly never seen it for sale. It's essentially a pointed stick, but actually it is a commercial bulb planter, which I picked up in a sale. And it's just a nice, hefty pointed stick with a bar that you can put your foot on and just press down in the ground, and there's your hole. And the key thing, when you're planting permanently in a border, is to plant nice and deep. If you've got the bulbs here, you take one out, like that. What you want to try and do is have the equivalent of 2 bulbs on top of it below the surface of the soil. So that's one bulb and then another bulb, and that's how deep it wants to go. And that'll do 2 things. 1, the bulb will grow better for it, and 2, because it's in a border, you've got less likelihood of digging it up. When you're planting daffodils into grass, the time-honoured technique is to take a handful of bulbs and just throw them onto the ground and plant them wherever they land, and that tends to look the most natural way of doing it. But of course you can't really do that in a border. So there are 2 ways of going about it. Either you just put them wherever there's a bare space, which is what I'm doing here, or if it's an empty border and it's all bare space, you can divide it into squares just by using sticks. Equal-sized squares, and allocate the same number of bulbs to each square, but then don't worry about whether you plant them regularly. Some could be all packed in the middle of the square, some could be around the outside. That doesn't matter. Daffodil bulbs should go on flowering year after year after year. So it's worth treating them well when you plant. And just a handful of grit in the bottom of each hole, so the bulb is sitting on grit, and that means that it will never be sitting in a puddle of water. This heavy soil certainly can get very wet. Right. And then the only other thing to bear in mind when you're planting is try and put them the right way up. If in doubt, pointy way up. Roots growing from a flat plate at the bottom, and the flowering stem will come from the sharp end. Now, it's very straightforward. All I've got to do is finish planting the whole border. And obviously, planting daffodils is something to be getting on with this weekend, if possible. But if you're not planting daffodils, here are some other things you can be doing.
If you have a citrus plant covered by a horrible black mould, there's a good chance it has become infested with scale insect. Look for brown, limpet-like creatures and remove them with the back of your thumbnail. Mould grows on the sugary honeydew excreted by the insects. Gently rub this off with some very dilute soapy water. October is a good time to be moving herbaceous perennials. Because the soil is still warm, the roots will have time to establish before winter sets in. To avoid stressing the plant, cut off the foliage before giving it a good drink. As the days get shorter and the nights grow colder, it's worth giving salad crops a bit of extra protection. Either throw a layer of fleece over them or insulate them with a cloche. Not only will this help protect them from frost, it'll keep them growing for a bit longer too.
Now, I quite often get letters and envelopes that contain bits of plants, more often than not have turned to compost by the time they reach me. But I got this the other day, which is really interesting. It's from Mrs. Stainer in Devizes. And Mrs. Stainer says, I wonder if you could tell me what has caused my Gardener's Delight tomato plant to produce the enclosed cluster. And this is the enclosed cluster. It's pretty spectacular. It's a very, very warty, knobbly tomato. Well, I've grown Gardener's Delight this year too, and you can see that they look like this. These are small, round fruit. And I think this, in fact, is not Gardener's Delight. Now, I'm sure you planted it as such, or sowed it as such, but it's quite common to get a rogue seed in a packet. And if you compare your tomato, which you thought was Gardener's Delight, with this one here, which is Constelluto Fiorentino, which is a beefsteak variety, it's much more like this. And you'll see actually this one also has these funny protuberances growing from the base of it. Beefsteak tomatoes are much more likely to suffer from these kind of weird growths. And what causes them is stress. It's a physiological reaction to stress. And it tends to happen on the lower trusses. The fruit is formed in June. And what happens in June and perhaps early July is you get hot days and cold nights. And that's very stressful for a tomato. Or you might get a situation where you overwater or you underwater. And again, that will stress the plant. As it gets bigger and older, those stresses disappear and they're better able to handle it. But I would say I award you the Knobbly Tomato Award of 2013. Now, Carol has been in North Wales this week in search of late flowering colour.
Wildflowers are tough. All they need to thrive and flourish are the right conditions. They don't necessarily need enchanted woodland or mystical meadows. Here in the Greenfield Valley off the North Wales coast, all one particular plant needs to do its thing with great joy are the ruins of an 18th century copper mill. This is Eupatorium cannabinum, hemp agrimony. It gets its Latin name from the fact that its leaves bear a striking resemblance to hemp, from which cannabis is made. It belongs to Asteraceae, the daisy family. Not obvious at first, but when you examine these flat heads, you find that they're composed of lots of separate florets, and each one of those has several flowers within it. And every single one of them is rich in nectar. This is a plant adored by butterflies, and that's what brought it to the attention of wildlife expert Jan Miller. She holds a national collection of eupatoriums in her garden near Holywell. So were you interested in all flowers, first of all?
Well, I was interested in wildflowers, many years back. And when we first got the chance to move here in the early 80s, they were talking about all the wildflower meadows dying out. And I principally wanted some land to have a wildflower meadow on. But then I started noticing all the insects that were coming to the wildflowers and the wild grasses, so I got interested in those after that.
So what is it about eupatoriums that make them so special for butterflies?
It's like the buddleia flower, if you think of it. Lots of little tiny flower heads very close together, so they don't expend a lot of energy going from one plant to another. They can just perch on the plant and dip in lots of little drinks of nectar in the same place.
They can fill up at one bar.
That's right. Yeah. Different butterflies fly at different times of year.
Yeah.
They don't all come out all summer. In recent years, we've been having quite mild Novembers, and even then, if it's warm enough, it's above 15 degrees, butterflies can fly, and they need to stock up on nectar. So the eupatorium is a really useful late flowering plant.
this. It's such a handsome specimen. What's this?
Yeah, well, it's a form of the American Joe Pye weed, which was named after an Algonquin Indian, apparently, who used it to cure an outbreak of typhus with the pioneers. And that's how it got its funny name. But it's really a native in America, like ours is here, but this one goes on flowering much longer. In a number of states, it's considered a pernicious weed. And,
pernicious?
Well,
yeah.
And especially in sort of damp areas. So it does spread by putting out runners underground and then coming up all over the place and making big clumps. But you can contain it by chopping bits off round the edge.
But you can propagate them, presumably, from these
It's very easy to propagate from a clump off the root, but they're devil of a job to actually get through. I have to use a saw.
Yeah.
And sometimes I have to get my husband with a mattock to get
a mattock or an axe, I should think.
Out, yeah. So they're not for the faint-hearted, really.
But with these Astropurpureums, I mean, some of them are given names that suggest that they're quite small and restrained and better for smaller gardens?
Yes, I think the trouble is that when you grow them from seed or even from division, the first 2 or 3 years they only grow about 2 or 3 feet high. So people think they're dwarfs and they're sometimes sold as a dwarf variety.
So yes, you're lulled into a false sense of security and then up they come. If you want something new and different for your autumnal borders, why not give Eupatoriums a try? Not only will they introduce fresh colour, give you structure and form, and fill big spaces, but they'll also help you hang out the welcome sign for all those butterflies you'd love to see in your garden.
Well, we've seen how Eupatorium can extend the flowering season, but if you really want colour in the middle of the deepest winter, then you need to start planning now and use bulbs. I've got 3 different types here. I'm clutching these enormous Hippeastrum bulbs, more often called and known to most of us as amaryllis. And these, of course, have great tall stems and a vast trumpet of flower. This is royal velvet, which has got really good rich red colour. I love them. Now, I've got a number of pots here on the table, and they're deliberately chosen to be decorative, because it seems to me that a really nice Christmas present is to give someone a flowering bulb in a handsome pot. It doesn't have to have drainage holes. You see, this one here is solid, or you can have one with holes. So I've got special bulb compost here. It's a peat-free bulb compost with added charcoal, which keeps it sweet. And that's particularly relevant if you are planting without drainage holes, because otherwise you get an anaerobic reaction and the organic matter in the compost can start to smell a bit, but this is perfect. They don't need to be buried. As long as the roots are underground, that's really all you need. And I can set that in like that and then pack more of the compost around, leaving at least half the bulb sticking up out of the soil. And that is all you need to do as far as planting. Now give that some water, and the key to provoke that into flower is give it heat. So initially, put it somewhere as warm as possible, and an airing cupboard will do fine. And once you start to get an inch or 2 of decent growth, then it can have some light, but don't take away the heat. And the more heat you give it, the quicker it will flower. And it will flower for about a month. Okay, now, this is a hyacinth bulb. It's actually a lovely one called Delft Blue, and it's got that wonderful blue, the colour of Delft pottery. Now, where you have drainage holes, it's a good idea to put some crocks in, if nothing else, to stop the compost falling through. But you don't need to do too many. Just a few in the bottom like that. Composting on top of them. Now, these hyacinths, I want to leave at least half above the surface of the soil. Now, I'm just going to push that in for the moment. And what we'll do, I can get quite a few. I want a really good show. around the bulbs. Now, to trigger those hyacinths into growth, I need to give them some cold and I need to give them some dark. And what that will do, of course, is make them behave as though they were underground. And that will trigger root growth. And then when it's got some established roots, then you'll start to see some shoots appear. And that could take anything between 4 and 10 weeks, according to the type of hyacinth. And it's worth pointing out now that it will only happen if these hyacinths have been prepared. So if you want to grow them like this, as opposed to in the garden, then make sure you buy prepared hyacinth bulbs. Check them once a week. Then when you see nice strong shoots growing, they can come out of the dark into the light. Unheated greenhouse is fine, or a cool windowsill. And when they're flowering, if you put them into a really hot, steamy living room over Christmas, those flowers will go over very quickly. Whereas a nice cool windowsill, they will go on flowering for a surprisingly long time. Okay, and my final bulbs are paper white daffodils. Now these are the Christmas favourites. Fabulous scent, really strong. So plant the bulbs around the outside. Now these can be buried, but you don't need to worry about burying them any particular depth. And one in the middle. I put these into the greenhouse where they're frost-free, but no special treatment. They can go on a windowsill, and they are entirely primed to flower after 6 weeks in winter. And if you want to give somebody some that will flower just after Christmas, I would plant your paper white daffodils at the very beginning of November. That's it. Easy peasy. Now these can stay in this greenhouse, actually. It'll be perfect for them to bring them on. The amaryllis I'm going to go and put in an airing cupboard. And these will go in a nice, cool, dark shed. Well, that's it for this week. I'll be back before Christmas. In fact, I'll be back next week. See you then. Bye-bye.